And we're live today on Imagine Fitting In with Diane Gagel. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And honestly and openly, Diane and I are we really we don't know each other, but I think on some sort of
I don't think
DNA.
we've ever met unless were you at the reunion Dale was talking about?
I was there in 2018. I was
Yeah,
there.
we were there too.
Okay, I probably saw you, but missed you.
Well, no, yeah, it was like a Grand Central Station, all the people that were there.
Yes. And that was just so nice that Dale put that energy out and hosted everybody. And obviously it's very special on the farm
Yeah.
there. And, again, when we spent that time together, and again, for those who are watching, I want to do a big shout out. Am I pronouncing the name right? Hemmelgarden?
Yeah, Hamilton Garden.
Okay. Hemmelgarden and got a Muller. And for
Or I think when they came to this country, they pronounced it Gutemüller.
Gutemüller.
Yeah, that's the way I would think they pronounced it that way, Gutemüller.
Okay.
But of course, I got, as Dale pointed out, changed several times.
Right.
Uh, but we'll talk about that a little bit if you want.
Okay. And then, again, we are, I was kind of, we were probably, we've never really met, but we're somehow connected as I'm going to see if I get this straight. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I will.
Is it my great grandfather, or is that my great grandfather, or to my great
Which one are
great?
you talking about? Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Frederick Guttamuller.
Frederick. Okay.
Yes. Would that be considered my great great grandfather?
Seal was your grandmother, right?
Yes.
So that he would be your great grandfather.
He would be my great grandfather.
Mm,
Got it. Okay. So Frederick Guttamuller was my great grandfather.
right.
And now, is he also your great grandfather, or is he your?
No, Joe's my husband.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
My maiden name is Van Skyver.
Okay.
I'm not related to you people. I just did the family history.
Okay. Now, okay. So is it Joe Gagel?
Yes.
And then how is that linked? Okay. So his
Mother was Teresa Guttamuller, Seal's sister.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Now it makes sense. Thank you so much for that clarity. And, I'm going to kind of let you shoot from the hip, Diane. And I'm very excited about what you're going to contribute and share with the entire clans of the Guttamullers, and to what degree the Hemmelgardens are interested. I'm sure they're going to be just as interested. So what can you tell us about, those, the times in Germany, what they're experiencing, and how, these families came over?
Well, before we start that, the first thing I want to clear up is Dale and you trying to figure out how you're related, cousin wise.
Yeah.
And technically, you are Dale's first cousin once removed.
Got it.
You are second cousins to his children.
Oh, okay. I knew I wasn't correct on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the first thing.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
Joe also would have been your first cousin once removed. What
Okay.
that means is once the removal part is generations, you're not in the same generation as
Yes.
Dale or my husband.
Right.
You're the generation of my kids and Dale's kids. So that makes you second cousins based on your great grandparents.
Okay. Well, thank you for that
That's how that works.
clarity. Okay.
Yeah. And Dale, the other thing that Dale mentioned was he thought the Guttamillers were persecuted for religion that's not why they came at all. That time period in Germany was, well, the time that the Guttamillers were in Germany, especially Frederick's grandfather, they had some pretty rough times. First of all, the effects of the Napoleonic Wars affected Germany. In 1815, which affected the whole world, there was a volcano erupted in Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
And there was so much ash that floated around the world that in 1815, there was never a month that didn't have freezing weather,
My
which, of
goodness.
course, for farmers was a big problem.
Right.
Now in Europe, it was even more of a problem. It did end up causing a famine in Europe. In America, it was a problem. It was definitely a problem, but because there were so many other resources, the wildlife in this forest, so on and
Yes.
so forth, they were able to, get through better. But in Europe, it was not a good thing. And then following that, there were the July Revolution of 1830 in Germany. And this is where the beginning of the unrest of the peasants not having any say and the princes telling them what to do. And they were starting to get agitated about having no control over their lives, basically. And it had nothing to do with religion. It was all, power.
Sure.
And what it ended up being in this time period, and this is going to be familiar to people today, liberal versus conservative. The conservatives were the princes, and the liberals were the people who were starting these various movements
Yes.
to get more say for the people, like the Guatemalans and the Hemmelgarns, and my ancestors too. The same thing. I had ancestors in southern Germany they came over before the Guatemalans. They came over in 1832, which was a big year for German immigration. The early 1830s. Now, actually, all your ancestors, my ancestors, they came over before the big unrest in Europe, which was 1848. And did you ever see the play Les Miserables?
Yes, I did.
That's about the revolutions of 1848 in Europe. And of course, there are people, your people and mine came up, German anyway, came over before that, which was fortunate probably. But the economics in Germany at the time, when they were getting to think about coming over, was the fact that um, many things had happened during this time period besides the political unrest.
Mhm.
There was other economic things. Many of like your ancestors, the Guatemalans and the Hemmelgarns, were from northern Germany, and they dealt a lot with the Netherlands as far as the linen production and providing supplies to them back and forth. And by this time, by the 1830s, they were starting to mechanize things. So these little houses that before had wove the linen and things like that, they were losing their income. Plus, there have been many crop failures during that time period too.
Mm.
So things were looking good for the people who didn't own land. And of course, in Europe, there was a finite land. In other words, most of the land was owned by the wealthier people, the princes, the dukes, and so forth and so on. So there wasn't much land for people to even hope to get any.
Wow, okay.
So is when genealogy we talk about when it comes to immigration, the push pull, what either pulled people to come to America or pushed them. And actually, the Guatemalans, the Hemmelgarns, and my ancestors were pushed because of what they were facing at home. And by the 80s, America was seeing in a much better light in Europe than it had been
Mm.
previously. And so when they came, so they start thinking, okay, we have a better chance of economically and also owning land, which is a big thing. And you notice that the Hemmelgarns, the Guatemalans, and my ancestors, one of the first things they did was buy land if they could, if they had the money. Now they had to have some money to come over here. It cost about $50 a person, and that's a lot of money in the 1830s to come over. And then,
Mhm.
of course, they had to have money to pay for transportation once they got here, which for the Guatemalans and Hemmelgarns would have been land transportation over to the Ohio River. And then they took the Ohio River to Cincinnati, which is the beginning of the Miami-Erie Canal, which then took them north to the land that they were interested in. Now, I've heard there's been professors or somebody that studied these Germans in Western Ohio,
Yeah.
and they said, well, one reason they like the area is because it reminded them so much of Germany. Well, that could be very well true. Probably better, actually, because there's so many mountains to deal with, but except when you cross them. But once you got into Ohio, it was open. Plus, at this particular time in Ohio, the Native American issue had been pretty much settled to the detriment of the Native Americans. And so there was all this land that was now available for settlement. So that's basically the background. Do you have any questions about that,
Uh,
Greg?
well, yeah, definitely puts it in context and the the historical experiences, both environmental, uncontrollable, and those that are obviously uncontrollable in terms of who has what and who can have the access to what. And then, so did the Himmelgarden and the Gottemillers, that those clans, did they kind of come over separate times? How did that
The
transpire?
Hemmelgarns and the Guttemillers, yeah, they came at separate times. Now, interesting is I sent you a copy of the, passenger list for
Yes.
the Guttemillers, and you notice the new spelling there too. Now, that was probably written down by an American when they got here. I've never seen the original transcript of the ship's passenger list. By the 1830s, the ship's captains were required in Bremen, which is where they came out of, to write down every person who would name, age, and so forth. And then that was handed over at the port, which in this case was Baltimore. And then they would copy things. So what I sent you is probably the Baltimore version of it. Okay.
Hmm.
So spelling is what I assume he copied from the manifest from the ship's passenger list, but I don't know that for a fact. I can only surmise that.
Hmm.
And then I've seen it two different other ways too in documents in the States. Most Germans had one spelling in Germany, and when they came over here, came out another way, and then eventually they would probably formalize what the spelling was going to be, like Dale was talking about. And some families decided to make changes,
Right.
which again he talked about, which is not uncommon. For example, my family, I have a German family. In fact, it's the last of my ancestors that came over in 1850s. The German spelling, I think, I haven't found it yet in Germany, was Varnau. Well, they got here, it became Varno, Varno. Well, somebody in the family decided either they didn't like that, or I was told there was a fight in the family, and some of the families changed it to Farno.
Oh,
So whether you're F Varno or V Varno, we're all related. But that's what happened with the Germans quite often. They would,
wow.
for whatever reason, they wanted to make it simpler. They had a fight, whatever.
That's
Um,
pretty interesting.
yeah. So, and again, you have to remember most of these people were illiterate as far as English was concerned. So the Americans wrote it down. They did the best they could.
Yeah.
But it is of course, your people all came before Ellis Island. And everyone talked about Ellis Island. They changed the name, so that's not true. People came later. They did not like the Gagel, like Joe's family. His grandfather's the one who came, and they didn't change it. You would have to do that yourself if you want your name changed. So that's a misnomer or a myth out there about Ellis Island. And as I said, I think the people that at Baltimore that met the ships, I think they did the best they could when they read the names or, talked to
Right.
the people, which again, remember, they're speaking German to English speaking people. So you can see how that could get messed up.
If somebody has a bad day on the either end, and it's all could go anywhere sideways.
What
Okay.
I think is amazing that these people had, well, the Hemmelgarns struggled more than the Guttemillers did. So the Guttemillers, when they came, they must have had some money because they almost went directly into buying land. The Hemmelgarns, however, they struggled a little bit. They had to work like a year at least, and they first landed in Springfield, Ohio, as far as Ohio is concerned. And apparently they struggled a little bit to get enough money once they got here to buy land. But the Guttemillers, from what I could find, once they got to Mercer County, were able to just buy land. Of course, you can buy land also on, well, what we would call a mortgage, but what wasn't a mortgage in those days. But you could buy it on bits and pieces if you get my draft. You have to have everything flat out down
Right.
on it.
Hmm.
But now Dale mentioned too about having a original document signed by I think Martin Van Buren. He said, and that's true. But what I've read from the Hemmelgarden in history is that when they bought the land from from an American, they apparently gave him the original document they got from Martin Van Buren. Now, if that's what Dale was talking about, I don't know because I've never seen what Dale has
Okay.
in that part. But when they came, it'd be very unlikely that there would be. virgin land. In other words, it had never been occupied by a, uh, Euro-Asian or Euro-American,
Mhm.
'cause most of this land, up until the War of 1812 was all native, and then after the War of 1812, Ohio Indians were moved to reservations. The closest one to Maria Stein was Wapakoneta.
Mm.
That was an Indian reservation. So, that's where my ancestors ended up. They ended up there after the Indians were moved out in the late 18 or mid-1830s. So
Mm.
the time your ancestors came, they were moving the Indians west to Kansas,
And
and
so
they
what
may have seen Indians too. I don't know.
Oh, wow. So what what do we know the year the Guatemalans arrived in the year the Hemel arrived in the Mercer County?
I think Hemel Gardens were 1838. I see, I have a printout here from Hemel Gardens. I think I sent that to you too. See what I said here. There was one in the Mercer County history.
Mhm.
They said in their history they put in the Mercer County, it was 1835, Hemel Gardens. So they came about the same time. Although, um, and actually, it's lucky they came that time period, 1835, 1838, for the Guttemillers, because when my ancestors came in 1832, there was a widespread cholera epidemic,
Oh, boy.
and on the canal itself, because cholera traveled along waterways. It came from Europe actually, and then hit the
Sure.
Canadian and American waterways. And actually, my ancestor that came, he lost his wife and 2 of his children when he got to Ohio
Oh, boy.
because they got cholera. And they were lucky they came later because the cholera epidemic was gone by then. So
Mm.
they didn't face that added
Wow. I mean, boy,
problem.
like, can you imagine, like, not knowing and you're, like, coming over and you don't know, whoa,
Yeah.
what a what a hop, skip, and jump in a time good timing, whatever. Wow.
Yeah. And they probably, I don't know if they knew anybody over here. I mean, I know the Gagels did, but I don't know about the Guttemillers and the Hemmelgarns if they had. Now, both the Guttemillers and the Hemmelgarns came from the same town in Germany,
Okay, and which town is that again?
Neuenkirchen bei Vorden in Hanover. It's a long name. I sent you a map that shows where it is.
Yeah, and remind Yeah, yeah,
It's
go
very,
ahead.
from what I can see, the modern picture I sent you, it looks like a very pretty little town.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. I saw it's definitely pretty. Um, d is that and if we from a perspective in your memory, is it like when we look at, Germany per se, is it, northeast, northwest, southeast, or where would you say it just in
It's
general?
northeast or northern. It's close to the Netherlands and
Okay,
the Scandinavian countries.
okay. That would probably make sense in terms of I had gotten the, 23andMe done, and there was Scandinavian and Netherlands,
Yeah.
as well as obviously a lot of German stuff, so that's interesting.
Well,
Um,
Joe did his DNA. Of course, that includes his dad's side of the family, and he's like 95% German. Although part of that is Scandinavian,
okay.
but his family was started out in northern Germany too, and they too were same situation as though later. They went through the same things.
Mm,
Now, his grandfather came. The story was to escape Prussian draft to the military.
mm.
He came over by himself when he was like 17 or 18,
I'm sorry, who is
which
this
was
again? Who came over?
Joe's grandfather, the Gagels,
Okay.
which
Wow.
I thought was pretty amazing. But he had cousins in Maria Stein, so it
Okay.
wasn't like he was coming over here, totally clueless.
Had a support
He did have
system.
relatives, but I don't know about the Guttemers and the Hemmelgarns if they knew somebody that came earlier or not. I don't know that aspect of it. As far
Okay.
as I know, they came cold, as far as making their own way.
Okay. And then, again, I'm following your lead in terms of They're there. Both the Himmelgardens and the Guatemalans come just after the cholera, and they both kind of like there was like it had all the Native Americans had been shifted over to Wapakoneta before they got there, or was it in
Yes.
process? It was okay before they got there.
No, they were there. No, they were there since the War of 1812. Between the War of 1812 and 1832, there was a reservation in Wapakoneta for the Shawnee. And there were other
Okay, now I
reservations
got.
in Ohio too, in Northern Ohio, but that was the closest one to Mercer County.
Excuse me.
And Andrew Jackson, well, quick history on the Native American policy. Before Andrew Jackson, the theory was the Indians could be assimilated into American society.
Mm.
Um, then by the time Andrew Jackson came along, that was no longer the theory.
He
Theory
was
was
like,
they should be all separate.
okay, so he was like, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And so after the War of 1812, actually the Indians in Wapakoneta, the Native Americans there, the Shawnee, they had Quakers who had come in to help them as act as liaisons with the government. And
Uh-huh.
they taught them how, the farming techniques, anything they needed to know. They helped them get supplies. Actually, when the Indians were driven out, um, there was buildings there. There was a mill that they had built. I mean, they were farmers there, and so they had to leave all that behind. They were given money, if you will, by the government. But you heard the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee in the South. There was
Right.
also one for the Indians in Ohio too. It wasn't as bad, but it was not well planned.
I can. Oh my
And so when
gosh.
they moved out, all that land around Wapakoneta was opened up to settlement or purchase. And my ancestor on my mom's side bought the land there in 1832. And he
Mm.
was Catholic, just like the Millers and the Hemmelgardens. But they went in cold. They didn't know anybody there.
What
That I
kind of
do
what
know.
what kind of is what kind of land compared to like up in Maria Stein or whatever in Wapakoneta? What kind of?
Same. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Excuse me.
It's flat, rolly type. No mountains, of course, to contend with. But when they came, and I think Dale pointed this out too, it was virtually all forest in Mercer County, Updates County, and so forth. When they first came, it was forest. And I'm talking about dense forest. Some parts sunlight never didn't come through.
Wow.
And so it was something. And plus, another thing you don't understand about the Germans in Germany is the trees over there were not as extensive, and also they were owned usually by the gentry. And you could get in real trouble for cutting down a tree if you were not didn't
What do
own
you
that land in
what do you
Germany.
mean by the
But
gentry?
people own the land. People actually own the land with the trees on them and so forth, which most of your ancestors, my ancestors did not own land in Germany. So they were working for other people.
So you couldn't just cut down trees when you were there, like you
Oh,
were.
no.
Okay,
No.
got it. Got it.
You could get into real trouble doing that if you were not the owner or didn't get permission.
Oh wow.
And so when they came to America, I mean, they were just overwhelmed by the fact of all these trees here. And of course, that also meant something they hadn't had to do in Germany was they had to clear the land or to plant things for two reasons. One, of course, to have a field, but also for sunlight.
Right.
But then you had all the building material you needed. There's two sides of that. They had plenty of
Right.
material to build with.
So we were talking about the dense forest, and I had gone and it talked. We mentioned about how the Native Americans were moved, or obviously their trail of endeavors to their new locations and making way for these settlers, and talked about how dense the forests were and the trees. And I guess I left off where my question was, what kind of skilled trades, I'm sure they had to come in, start chopping down trees, building homes and making bricks and all that kind of stuff, all that stuff. So I was just curious on the level of if you know any historic trades that when they first got here that they were involved with.
Well, I'm assuming the Guatemalans and the Hemmelgarns were in farming in general in Germany, but they also, as part of their cash income, as I said, was dealing with the Netherlands, which was making linen, which is uses flax. Now I know there were some others that came at the same time as the Guatemalans and the Hemmelgarns who did
Now
flax.
you said linen in for flax.
Flax is used to make linen, yeah. And I
Okay,
think some of their first crops were flax, but of course then they moved into the other thing, corn and wheat and all that kind of stuff.
so flax is it flax FLAX?
Yeah,
And
it's a
it's
it's
a
a grain crop, but you could make it into linen.
okay. So is it like wait, I ingest flaxseed oil all the time.
Yeah, well,
Is that the same stuff?
yeah,
Whoa. Okay. Then you
and,
go.
they would have brought that. Now that would have been like a cottage industry in Germany, which was being taken over by the mechanization of the industry in
Right.
the Netherlands and places like that, so they were losing that income, and then, as I said before, they had poor crops, the farming aspect. Like I said, it was like a perfect storm of, pushing these people, the poor people, the landless people out.
Yes.
Now, the Guatemalans, as I said, must have had some kind of money. I don't know where or how much, but as I said, they immediately bought land when they got here. Of course, they
Mhm.
had paid transportation over and land transportation, and then, of course, I don't know how much they charged in the canal, but it wouldn't have been much, I would think, from Cincinnati to New Bremen or Minster.
Okay.
But, they usually charge per person, however, and the Guatemalans, there was, I think, the couple and 3 children they had when they came.
Okay, that yeah, that I think sort of that aligns with Dale. I think
Yeah,
Dale mentioned that.
and, of course, the Minster had already been settled. It was called Stallowtown at the time, but that was the closest Catholic church too. So, the other Catholic churches came later after it was more settled, and Maria Stein,
Okay.
Rose,
Uh-huh.
Stella, so forth. Why there's so many church it always amazed me there's so many Catholic churches that close together. I mean,
Right.
doesn't
Now,
make sense to me,
okay,
but
and now
apparently.
let me ask you, let's maybe fast forward and Frederick
Mhm.
meets Catherine Hemmelgarden
Yeah. They're
and
both that both families are from the same town in Germany, so they probably knew each other over in Germany.
well, like,
They
okay,
both families are from Neuenkirchen.
wow. So they're like, okay, you've gotten here, we've gotten here. Oh, hey, it's good to see you. We're arrived.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then they
that's pretty common where not just the Germans, but they people like to live with I always told my genealogy students, people like to live with like people, whether that was language, like the Germans,
sure.
religion, Catholic, or something else that would give them some sense of knowing these people.
Community.
Okay.
Right.
And
Familiarity.
right. And actually one of the early is it Guatemala? Look at the hold on a minute. Let me find my sheet here that has all the ancestors on it. Here it is. Frederick's grandmother was a Tangeman. And there's a Tangeman family that came on the same boat as the Guatemalans. So again, these people know each other. They either met on the ship or they knew each other. And the
Right.
Tangemans were from Neuenkirchen too. Is with the when they got here, you know, the later generations, like Frederick's father and so forth, when they started marrying outside the Neuenkirchen. But
Yes.
of course, I think you asked Dale how they would have met. Probably in church, to be honest with you.
Right?
Of course, again, they came from the same village, so they would have known each other. The families would have been familiar, and the other thing too is I don't know how familiar you are with Shelby County, which is where Minster and Fort Recovery are in. But there's a little parish right smack dab in the middle of all these Germans called St. Patrick's, and that's an Irish settlement, Irish Catholics who came in the 1840s. And he was talking about the Protestants and the Catholics, having separate churches like Bremen and Minster,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
true. But even though the Irish were also Catholic, they didn't want to mix with the German Catholics. They didn't speak the same language.
Right, obviously.
So when they came together, they settled together and they had their own church, which is my smack dab in the middle of all the Germans in Sydney, Fort Loramie, Minster, and so forth. But that's what people did in those days. They liked to live with like people, whatever that like
Mhm.
was. And I'm sure that's part of the scenario behind how Catherine and Frederick met was either
Now
church or their familiarity.
okay. Now you mentioned the Irish and Germans, and you had sent a picture, and I apologize not being able to get this stuff up on the screen. There's a cartoon about
Right.
the gentleman inside the barrel, and both the
That
Irish and the Germans were considered
okay. There's
what
two
would you
things
say
you have
about
to
that?
yeah, there's two
Yeah.
things you have to keep in mind from that time period. The Irish Catholics that came after the Irish famine in the but before that, the German Catholics were there. And of course, Cincinnati was full of Germans, both Protestant and Catholic, but largely Catholic by this time. And as you know, Germans like to drink beer, and they would have beer gardens in Cincinnati and so forth. Then, of course, moving north, they didn't call them beer gardens; they called them bars and saloons. But
Yes.
okay, there's two things wrong with that as far as the other Americans are concerned, the ones that have been here for generations. A, they drank to excess, they thought. And two, they were papists. In other words, they were Catholic.
Oh, so
They did
okay,
not
so the Protestants thought them they were
well, America was largely Protestant at that time. They did not like
yes,
Catholics.
got it. Well,
And
that makes sense running historically in terms of yeah, okay, got it.
so but even within the Catholics, when they split off, like I said, the Irish and Germans, they didn't mix. Well, they didn't speak the same language either. Plus, the German Catholics had their masses in German, and of course, the Irish had it in English. So that can be a problematic when you're going to church. So in the 80s, which is probably when that image I sent you came from, what they didn't like was two things. They were papists and they were drinkers. The Irish, of course, whiskey, and the Germans beer. And I don't know how much you know about political history, but there's a party in the 80s, a political party that developed called the Know Nothings. And they're a very racist organization. They didn't like papists, they didn't like Jews, they didn't like immigrants. Sound familiar?
Oh,
And they didn't get far. They did have one presidential candidate, and then they sort of merged with a bunch of other people who were dissatisfied with the old political parties, especially the
right.
Whigs. That was the
Yeah,
party before that.
yes.
And they all got together and they became the Republican Party.
Well then. So,
And Lincoln was their second candidate. The first was John C. Fremont. Lincoln was their second presidential candidate. And you know the history since then. But that's
right.
how the Republicans got started with the Know Nothing Party, which I
That's
mean, they were
interesting.
very nationalistic and also they didn't like immigrants, they didn't like Catholics, they didn't like Jews, all
Is yeah. Is this how the name, when it's called the country is called the Republic? Is that where that kinda came from?
no, Republic comes from the way our government's run. Well, it was one.
Oh, I'm sorry from the how'd it come?
How our government is organized. The
Okay.
Republic means you have representatives. In other words, we don't directly make decisions. We make them through our representatives in Congress, state
Okay.
legislators, so forth.
Okay.
That's a republic.
Okay.
The only true democracy in America was in New England, where the people would get together in the town halls and say yay or nay on
Yes.
something. That's true democracy. We have our overall government is republic,
O
not Republican big R, Republican small r.
right. Okay. So now okay. Boy, I mean, from
So
the
that picture I sent you represents how the attitude people had towards your ancestors, my ancestors. You know,
that they
of
were
course,
beer drinking outsiders, and they're like, they just short sighted them in terms of what they're capable of because
Yeah.
they just didn't want to, they were kind of what do you call it? Well, they've kind of been, looked down upon, basically,
Protestant, and
is
there's
a good
also
way of looking
Protestant
at it.
versus Catholic.
Right. And that, I mean, those are both forms of Christianity, obviously.
Yeah. Well, a lot of Protestants don't consider Catholicism Christian, if you knew that.
And wait, is that from an old way of thinking, an opinion, or I mean,
I don't
aren't
I'll
I
be honest,
aren't I correct? Right?
I
Aren't
haven't
I
read that.
correct in Catholicism in the form of Christianity?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it is, but there's some
Yeah.
Protestant faiths that did not believe that they were Christian.
Okay, so that is I could see that where that could be a problem.
Yeah,
I mean,
big
like,
time.
come on. You can just decide that no, no, it's not. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Wow. Wow, that kind of like radiates to modern day where, okay, well, you know what? We're all here, but we
Yeah.
decide, we think, and
No.
okay. I mean, is that
There's a
like
lot of stuff resonates from the time period when your ancestors came and now, unfortunately. Um, well, for example, in Europe, it was liberal versus conservatives, or conservatives versus liberals, however you wanna look at it, which pushed people out, and, the conservatives won in that case, to a certain extent, because the
right?
people who were pushing on the liberal side were the peasants and so forth, and a lot of them came to America. Of course, the Irish, it was just to survive.
What is that? What's that tell us about like just the human condition, or that the what do you call it? The strive for humanity continues, and that
Yeah.
people are from suffering to not having to then getting to one to control, and like, okay, I'm on the top and you can't have that now because I'm in a position to do that. And it's like, okay, it's just sort of like, okay, we have like America. Now we have a 2.0 version of a bunch of people being dissatisfied from that circumstance. I mean, here, and we see the beautiful result of when it does function and however it's organized, and ultimately down to the details, I guess it starts to matter. And it's interesting. It's both interesting, educational, a foundational kind of insight in terms of what you're like, the realism and the reality that there's a certain amount of like this hope, a clinging of hope that no matter how this continues, it's like still, historically, been a place for like, yeah, it's been put together. It's not perfect, but it's way better than this non-alternative of just, every country you said where people were striving and being controlled, and situations, resources, you're being, if push come to shove, you're like, what am I going to do? Right. So that's a very poignant historical fact and lesson,
Alright.
that it's like it's a reality, and it gets down to humanity now. We've all been cajoled together and mixing up so much. It's just crazy that it ultimately comes down to a humane level of thinking and cooperation, just to try to make what we have going still
Uh,
go.
I don't know if you're aware of the fact that in Mercer County, although it's more so, when I was younger than probably now, but Mercer County is pretty much divided in half. The southern half is Catholic, largely German, mainly German. Northern half is Protestant, and Saline
Mm,
is the midline, basically. I'm sure that's not, I mean, for example, when Joe and I got married, we moved to Rockford, Ohio, which is in northern Mercer County, and their Catholic church was so small. It was like a one-room schoolhouse, actually, compared to down where we grew up. There's 5, 6 Catholic churches there, you could walk to, and
yes.
that's the difference. And I had students who were at Rockford that first year I was there that were very prejudiced, I guess, because they knew I was raised Catholic.
Wow.
In fact, one of my students actually, I got stuck teaching a class called Bible as Literature, which new
Oh,
hires, so
wow.
they give me the crap subject too. Never been taught before. So at any
Now,
rate, I was teaching that, and one of my Protestant students said he didn't think it was right a Catholic was teaching the Bible.
Oh boy. So Diane, this leads me to ask a personal question. Like, was there a moment in your life as a young girl, or as when it came of realization when it sound like you're very apt on history, and was your interest created? Was it from a personal experience or a history of knowing? How did you become to this place where you know so much and you can, which is fascinating. I thank you so much for spending time with us, because I'm saying us, I'm saying the Gadamuller and the Himmelgarten and, everybody that chained through this whole essence of this clan. And it's just wonderful to get some perspective and insights. And I'm sure everybody's having some little educational moments and insights. I am. And the purpose of this podcast is to, heck, can we all just imagine fitting in? And how did you get so to a point with your historical prowess in your career, and that which we thank you for doing all this stuff on this deep family search?
Well, my father died when I was 10 years old, and I didn't know a lot about his family because his parents were divorced. And I went to Bowling Green University. I was a dual major at journalism and history, American history. I was always fascinated by American history. At any rate, I started doing genealogy research there, probably because my great uncle on my dad's side lived in Toledo, and he had the family Bible, which went back to the 1700s. Um, and at any rate, that got me started. I started research then. I mean, that was the dark ages compared to what you can do now in
Mm,
genealogy. At any
right.
rate, that got me started. Plus, I was a history major, genealogy, and then when I went and got my master's degree, I got it in American Studies, which is studying American history, American literature, American politics, political science, American art, anything has to do with America in a 100-year period. You had to pick a 100-year period.
So you're saying North and South America?
No, just North
No.
America Studies is North America.
Oh yeah. I mean, did you say Latin American studies? Is that what you said?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
American Studies is what my master's is in.
Got it.
But I do have a history major in my undergraduate degree too.
Well, we can all tell, honey. So thank you so much. I
Well,
mean,
plus
it's
doing this for 50 some more than 50 years, 60 years now of doing
sure.
genealogy, you pick up a lot more than you did in class necessarily, but
Right.
you have to do the historical background when you do genealogy. So that's
Okay.
how it all came about.
And then, so there, the Hemel Gardens and the Guatemalars are obviously there. Frederick and Catherine get together, and Dale told me that the crazy story about how was it Frederick that,
Well, the
or was it,
assassination attempt?
yes, was that his son? Wait, I'm
No, it was
confused.
Frederick.
It's Frederick. He
Yeah.
got so involved and was like trying to do the right thing, and then stuff went south, and he got shot. That was just an amazing story that I had not really heard about, that and the background. And it just showed so much, I mean, wonderful moral character, and justifiable kind of action to stand for what was right.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
felt really
you
proud
had
to
to.
hear that, but
They
it's
had to.
terrible
I
to
mean,
hear.
farmers participated in local government. I mean, they were township trustees, they were school board members, and then, of course, some moved up into the county government. It's not that uncommon for farmers to do that. They had in the get them always immigrants. By that time, they had resources that allowed them time, and they had children who would, help with the chores and things like that. So
Sure.
they had time and they had interest. Of course, they'd be interested in school boards. The township trustees were the ones that were probably the most influential for local people because they were the ones that were right there.
Yeah. Now
So
I would be remiss to not ask you a little bit more about, is it Teresa or Teresa?
Teresa, that's my mother-in-law. Yeah.
Okay, Teresa, your mother-in-law, and to how did she was, because I believe my grandmother was the third of nine. Is that
Yeah.
right? I think.
She was the oldest
And
girl, but third.
okay, and there was just two girls, correct?
No, there was Mary and
Oh,
yeah, Lucille, Teresa, and Mary.
Okay, and Teresa, how do you what do you know and you can share, and I'm sure I'm just doing this shout out, it's a shout out to the Gagels and obviously and to the Hemel Gardens and the big picture here. What can you tell us about Therese and to what degree you probably know more about possibly about her than Celia, my grandmother, but
Yeah, I didn't
what would you like to share about Teresa
well,
and all that?
I was told this now, how my sister-in-laws could probably fill in more, but,
Okay.
Therese, before she got married, before she married Jim Gagel,
Uh-huh.
she was working in Cleveland as a cook for a richer family. I mean, anybody higher service, right? In Cleveland.
Yes.
Now, what I was told was I tried to figure out if the dates gelled on this, but I was told that she was sent to Cleveland to work to provide money for her brothers to go to college. That's what I was told. Whether that's true, I don't know. I tried to look at the dates and I'm thinking, I
Who
don't know if
told
these
you?
dates gel or not when she would have been in Cleveland,
Yes.
but she did not. I mean, Jim and Therese married later than most people in those days, and she had come back from working in Cleveland, and
Mm,
apparently they met at a dance somewhere in
okay.
Mercer, Shelby County. That's my understanding. Now, my
So this is
sister-in-laws will probably tell you
yeah.
a lot more about it, but that's what I
So
was told, which I thought. And Therese
right.
went to high school. I remember Dale said something about his uncles went to high school in Minster, not Minster, St. Henry, I think he said. Now, Jim
Yeah.
Gagel went to high school in Minster because there wasn't a high school in Maria Stein.
Yes.
Therese went to high school. She went to Holy Angels in Sydney. She stayed with a cousin. I went to high school there.
Now that's up north, correct?
It's Sydney, yeah. Well, no, Sydney is like almost directly what east of or
Okay.
southeast of Maria Stein.
Okay.
And she had to stay there because she couldn't drive there and back. I mean,
Sure, sure.
so she stayed there. I don't know how many years she was there, but I know she graduated from Holy Angels. And her brothers, I apparently I didn't know this. They went to St. Henry High School, but I know Jim went to Minster High School. And it was after that time period when they eventually had a high school in Maria Stein.
Okay. And then obviously she was up in Cleveland and she came back and that's when she met Jim and started a
Yeah.
family.
The interesting thing about her, it must have been from her job in Cleveland. No matter how many people were there for dinner at her house, she was able to fix the exact amount of food that there was virtually no leftovers.
Well, maybe she was on a strict budget to
I guess,
complete
I
it
don't
with
know,
a
but
skill.
that was just that just always amazed me that
That's a master class right there.
yeah, it really is. I could never do that.
I mean,
She
how
did it.
can you how can you judge farm boys' appetites?
I know. Well, I'll tell you a little story about the first time I went to Joe and I were together, went to his
Yeah,
house for dinner, and it was just Fred and Joe because the girls were all out of this house, and Jim and
yeah,
Therese. And she put the food on the table. It was very Germanic in this way. She would do all the things. She'd bring out no one helped her. She put the food on the table and so forth, and then sat down. They said, of course, we say the prayer,
yeah.
grace. And then it was like a free for all, grabbing, everyone, the boys were grabbing all this kind of stuff. And anyway, I got home and I asked mom, my mother, I said, "Do you have any food left?" She said, "I thought you went over there for dinner." I said, "Yeah, so did I." And after we were married, Joe and I had to give him a little training on you ask before you take the last thing.
Oh, okay, yeah,
He
like
said,
it's like
"Really?" I said, "Yeah, that's usually the best way. You ask before."
okay, I was humbled, and it was a pleasant surprise where my late sister, God bless her, Julie, she married a Frenchman, and we went over there, and when you go when you're sitting around, drinking like, drinking wine, or if you want some more, and if it's within arm's reach, you grab it, and you're supposed to go around and make sure everybody else has that much enough they want before you pour your glass as a token, like right
Well,
courtesy.
that little theory didn't make it over here.
But it's like, yeah, that's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
I have another distinction personally.
Okay,
I was the
please.
only I was the only one at the Marion High School in school that was not related to somebody there. So I could date
That
anybody. I could date
yeah,
anybody.
so you're rolling in and they're probably looking at like, "Who is she?"
I, someday an anthropologist will look back and say, "How'd that Dutchman get among all those Germans?"
Germans. How
And
sweet. How sweet.
yeah, some of my classmates, because most of my classmates understood some sort of German. I don't think it was the
Okay.
German, but they understood some. Well, it was spoken at home. And they used to get a big kick out of cussing me out in German.
Yeah.
I learned some of
Uh,
the cuss words, but they would speak
okay.
German in the hallways. But yeah, I could. Some of my classmates, they had to be careful who they dated because they might have been cousins. I didn't have that
Yeah,
problem.
right. So tell me just a couple more things. Number one, I'd love to hear anything about my grandmother and to what degree there's any, your thoughts and your insights to that with her and my grandpa Borgert, Edwin Borgert,
Well, my
or
impression of Seal was
Bourget.
she's a very sweet person. Like I said, I was more around Lou, Dale's dad, because Lou was Joe's godfather.
Mhm.
And I was more around him than I was Seal because they lived in Dayton. And then, of course, it was later when Joe and I weren't together that I actually knew her. But
Okay.
Uncle Lou, he was, and Mary, she was married to Fred Becker, and he was a stitch. He was hysterical. The first time after Joe and I were engaged, we went to a Gutted Miller reunion, which was held at Coldwater Park. And I had really not known personally Lou, and definitely not Fred, but Joe introduced me to Uncle Lou and to Fred, and they said hi, and then they both looked at each other, and finally, I think it was Uncle Lou said, "I thought you were going with a blonde."
Now Uncle Lou that's Dale's father, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
He and Fred Becker, they just feed off each other, as I recall.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
after Joe and I were married, we're living up here in Toledo because I was going to grad school and Joe was working at Swanton as a teacher coach,
Yeah.
football coach. And we had an apartment in Maumee, and Maumee had the distinction at the time as being the home of the Anderson Company, which a lot of farmers down there would know. And they would come up to get fertilizer from Anderson's, and it was a big farm supply place.
Sure.
And at any rate, I was at home one day in the apartment. Joe was at football practice, and I was waiting for him to come home for lunch. And this knock on the door, which is very unusual because no one knew us there. I opened the door, and there was standing Uncle Lou. I said, "Hi, Uncle Lou." "Hi." I said, "Well, come on in." And I said, "Joe's not here right now. I'll be home in a little bit." And I told about football and all that. And we sat down and we were talking. I mean, I was talking, trying to get a
Yes.
conversation going. Obviously, I don't know him that well, but I knew Dale and so on. And Dale's brother Jim actually married one of my high school teachers. But at any rate, so I knew some of the family
Yeah.
pretty well. So we were talking, and he didn't, he gave me one word answers to everything. So finally, I said, um, "Would you like a drink? I have tea, whatever."
Mhm.
He said, "Touch of bourbon would be nice." And that was it. A touch of bourbon would be nice. So I went and got some bourbon and gave it to him, and we were fine.
Okay.
But he was up there
Now
getting tires apparently for the
okay.
farm. There's big truck sitting out in our parking lot in the apartment building.
Mhm.
And Joe came home, we had lunch, and, you know, I think he felt more comfortable once Joe was there, but
Mhm.
he always was a nice person to me.
Yeah. Do you have any insight, like, because there's, the older, original pictures, even the marriage photos of my grandfather and my grandmother, Ed and Celia. Um,
Mhm,
I I probably look mostly like my grandfather, Ed Borgert, in terms of those younger
mhm.
pictures, in terms of my, compared to Celia and whatever, but, um, do you have any knowledge of how they met specifically, or any, what was, I mean, in terms of, because she was older than Joe's mother,
Oh, yeah,
Teresa.
yeah. I think Teresa was in their
So
wedding
by
party.
time, so by time you kind of caught into this stream of things, they'd already been gone down to Dayton, is
Oh,
that
yeah.
correct?
I mean, I
Yeah,
think most of their kids were out of the house when I met her.
okay.
Most of her
And
kids.
okay, and Diane, I would love to just conclude and to give us any, how did you meet Joe and,
1st grade.
and 3rd grade?
1st.
1st! Whoa,
I'm not aware of it, but he was when we were in grade school, 1st and 2nd grade were in the same room,
okay,
and he was in
yes,
2nd grade and I was in 1st. I don't remember meeting him at all. I mean, I remember him in grade school when we were in grade school, but I don't remember him being in the room. Um, our 1st grade teacher, Sister Alberia, who was a little bit of a nun. I mean, she was just a little thing. That's why she probably taught
okay,
for but she would pair a 1st grader with a 2nd grader, and mine was Jane, one of Joe's classmates so Joe was probably paired with one of the boys in my class. Well, I don't remember him, but we had to I mean, we knew we were in the same classroom,
okay,
and, of course, he went to the seminary for 3 years, so, he didn't come back till my junior year,
okay,
in high school, and we
yeah,
were friends, but we didn't start to date till we were in college.
okay. So you were kinda were you going to school and, like, in the same still in this kinda same vicinity until you were able to spend
Well,
time
actually,
with each other?
my during high school, I lived right next to Gagel Hardware, if you know where that is, and Maria Stein, and we were like 4 doors Gagels were like 4 doors down from there.
Oh, okay. So, alright. Oh, I gotcha. So, of course, that made it like, right, you're right in the hood,
Yeah,
right in the community,
and like I
and,
said, I could date anybody because I was not related to anybody.
okay, and so the Gagels, you said they had a hardware store?
Yeah, that was
Okay,
started by, Joe's grandfather, the one that came over from Germany.
okay,
He married, a Sink, Synck, another German family, so and his grandfather, Michael, died young when Jim was, I don't know, 5 or 6, something like that,
mm,
quite young, and I give her credit, she had older boys who were old enough to take care of things, but a lot of her name was Catherine too. Catherine and, her older boys kept that store running. I give her credit for that,
right.
being able to do that,
Well,
um,
it
and
sounds
raising
like
kids.
yes, it sounds like, the right, from the home to the church to the farm store to the hardware store.
Yeah,
And that was like the essence of most universes back then and to build, and it's, and again,
yeah,
it's,
I don't where was
lovely to hear all this.
where was the Borgert family from? Do
Uh,
you remember?
from Alsace,
No, I mean
and,
in Ohio, where'd they live? Where
uh,
was your grandfather from?
that's a good question. I thought did I think that they lived up there? That's how they met? I don't
I'm sure
think
they
she
did.
met him. Yeah, yeah, and I don't know where I am not clear on where my grandfather's family, their
Well,
story.
where what places you met people in those days were, the church, if you went to the same church, dance
Right.
halls, dances, um, and I'm thinking, plus also if you visit relatives. I know there was
Yes.
Guatemala relatives over in western Mercer County and, like the Kramers and so forth, there's those people over there, and, you meet during social events and things like that.
Yes. Now
Mm.
you're making me want, Diane, you're making me want to, like, okay, am I gonna take this lead and do the deep Borgert on his side? I think I'm just gonna have to. We're gonna figure it out. I will speak to the camera to my Aunt Kathy. Aunt Kathy, maybe that's a project for us.
Yeah.
So, I
There you go.
really
Well,
appreciate all the insights and in the background. It's been fascinating.
that I sent you those pictures of Catherine's father, Catherine Hamilgarden.
Uh-huh.
I find him a fascinating guy because his wife died young, never remarried, and so he raised these kids and lived a long time, and that one picture I sent you was of him sowing seed in the field, which I assume is the way the Germans used to do it,
Yes.
I think it looked like a German outfit he had on, the smock and so forth. That was very Germanic to me,
Yeah.
and the long beard, and, he was, a big part of the Catherine's family. So, I always thought he was a fascinating person.
Mm.
Um, but and also he had a son. I've cut this out. I didn't send it to you, but one of Catherine's brothers, Leo, sent 5 sons to the military during World War II.
Whoa.
I thought was pretty amazing.
Wow.
In fact, there was an article in the Cincinnati or the Salina paper about him. One of them was a priest, Father Werner Hemmelgarten. He was a priest. He was a chaplain during the war. But 3 in the Navy and 2 in the Army.
Well, listen,
Then you
Diane, it's been, I don't know if you want to share any parting comments. It's been a real treat. I really, really treasure this time. I find it super engaging, insightful, and historic. And I'm sure everyone that's listening from after listening to Dale's memories and stories, and that you did this such a more deep and intensive background and framed it up so well. So I thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the clan, as we say, this big, broad
well,
clan?
there is on a personal nature.
Okay.
Joe died from leukemia, and one of the things we ran into while he was getting treatments, unfortunately, which weren't successful, but was the lack
Mm,
of platelets, which is used to treat blood cancers. And one
mm,
time he had to wait 24 hours to get platelets from Indiana. Red Cross couldn't find them in Toledo. So I urge people who, if there are blood donors in your family or the people
yeah.
who watch your cast, to donate platelets because platelets have a short shelf life, but they need platelets for cancer, for blood cancer treatment.
Mm,
So if
God
anybody out
bless.
there donates blood, consider because you have to say specifically you want to donate platelets. You can't, they just don't do that.
Okay.
Um,
So
so you have to say
when you go donate blood, you want to say like I'm donating, but I want to donate specifically platelets.
platelets, yeah. Because like I said, it has a short shelf life other than blood, and not enough people do it. Like I said, Joe had to wait 24 hours to get.
Mm. So there's obviously very vital and
Yes.
very, very,
So that's my personal take on
wow.
that. If
Well,
anybody out there donates blood, please consider platelets donation
yeah,
besides
that's
your regular donations.
sure.
'Cause he used a lot
Again,
of blood.
yeah. Again, God bless Joe, and thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that personal side and that message because it's yeah, it goes. You know what I think it goes back to, Diane? I think it goes back to you just put out a very humane message across the board. You
Yeah.
know, to doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. Those platelets doesn't matter where
Yes.
it's going, but it's vital and is about as precious as we know what we have kind of underneath our feet here. Obviously, starting, I feel like I'm like, whoa, yeah. When I go to Chicago and I moved to Los Angeles, you're like, oh yeah, you're Ohio farm boy, and for some reason I didn't want to own that because I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in suburbia, but we were close to like this, we were in a kind of both a suburban and rural area in Dayton
Yeah.
when we grew up. And I've just grown to really, really respect farmers. And again, it's a really
I
wonderful
mean,
sharing
you
today.
know,
So I thank you so much.
when I was going to school, I was considered a townie. There's the farm kids and there's the townies. And I was a Joe and I
Townie.
would be townies, Bill, Maria Stein, townie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but I can remember that, I was called
All
a
right.
town.
All right. So she was the Dutch girl townie coming into the farm
Yeah.
boy land. Okay. Well, thanks again, Diane. It's just been a real pleasure. And, we'll keep just keep your browser open for me and we'll keep talking.
Okay.
But I'm going to just say to everybody in the camera, so I hope everybody enjoyed this time spent with Diane. I want to, give her a big round of applause through your shares and likes to the podcast. I know so many people. There was like over 200 people, 200 200 views of Dale's podcast, and I'm sure we're going to get just the same here with Diane. And I thank you so much. It's been more than an honor. So thank you very much. All right.
My pleasure.
Till next time, everybody. And until next time, kids. Bye-bye.
Professor